As we go through tonight's discussion, keep in mind our big idea question, how a civilization's belief system, either religion or philosophy, influences its development. So tonight we're going to talk about political developments in India during the classical period, so it's government, as well as economic development. So how the Indian people subsisted, how they made money, any major advancements, etc. The Mauryan Dynasty. The Mauryan Dynasty is our first classical civilization in India after the Indus Valley civilization. It lasted from 322 to 232 BC, so almost 100 years before year zero. The major leader and founder was Chandragupta Maurya. He was the first one to unify the entire Indian subcontinent. You can see on the map the majority of India, as well as what is today Pakistan in the northwest area, is united under Chandragupta. Ashoka is our other important leader, which is Chandragupta's grandson. And Chandragupta was able to unify much of the Indian subcontinent. This is a large and substantial task since India is very diverse, both geographically and in its population. More on that later. Under Ashoka, Buddhism spread because Ashoka converted to Buddhism. At first, Ashoka was in charge. He was a military general and the leader of a campaign to expand the rule of India and of the Mauryan dynasty. However, it was during those wars that he saw the violence that was taking place and decided that peace and nonviolence were actually more his style, and so he converted to Buddhism and encouraged his people to do the same. So it was under Ashoka's rule that Buddhism spread throughout India. The Mauryan dynasty also promoted trade and communication. They traded along the Silk Road, which was accessed near the most northern region at the edge of the Himalayas. And there was great communication. There were communication systems throughout the empire. These traits led to stability and expansion of the empire, and therefore businesses were able to grow and prosper. They weren't worried about survival. Instead, there were innovations, etc. However, the dynasty fell after Ashoka's death, and so we'll have a period of a few hundred years until we have the Gupta dynasty. On the next map, you're going to see areas where Ashoka's rock and pillar edicts were put up, so pay attention to that. So here we see Ashoka's rock and pillar edicts. You also see the geography of the Mauryan dynasty. It cuts off right around the Himalayan mountains and goes almost to the southernmost part of India. The Gupta dynasty. You'll see on the map that the territory of the Gupta dynasty was not as large. However, the Gupta dynasty was more politically stable than the Mauryan dynasty. This was accomplished through negotiating with local princes. So during the time between the Mauryan and Gupta dynasty, India was largely ruled and decentralized, ruled by local princes. And what the Gupta dynasty did to assert their power was they intermarried their families with the local princes. This allowed them to expand influence, to have friendly relations with the region since they became family, and avoid fighting. So the Gupta dynasty is decentralized. However, the dynasty itself has regional control in that way. Also notice the years of the Gupta dynasty. It's from 320 CE to 535 CE, so this is after year zero. The Gupta dynasty undergoes a golden age in arts and sciences. We have a lot of stability, and that leads to advancements. Major advancements included the invention of the number pi, which you're hopefully familiar with, Pi Day, 3.14159.262. You can see the Deccan Plateau. The Guptas also created the concept of zero. Deccan Plateau is right in the center of India. And a decimal system dry, like we have arid, it's difficult to control because not many people live there. This decimal system is later going to be passed on to the Arabs. Make sure you're adding to your notes as we go, and that's why we have Arabic numerals, the number system we use today. Political framework is very diverse. You can see from the map all the different languages spoken in India, which is also all the different cultures present in India. So even though we think of India maybe having one culture, there are many, many subgroups even today. So that's why India's political framework was regional, not centralized. Geography made uniting and controlling the entire subcontinent very difficult. You have the Himalayan mountains to the northeast. You have the Deccan Plateau in the middle. So it was very varied and divided as a nation. You have also diverse peoples with different languages, different beliefs. There's no common philosophical heritage. And so that's the reason that we see religion oftentimes being used to bring people together. Each different region had a variety of political forms, so some had kings, some had emperors, some had assemblies of aristocrats, which are nobility. So instead of having one leader, they would have a group or a panel of leaders. This meant when our dynasties step up to take control, they have to deal with and accommodate all these different views and forms of politics in the regions. So we end up having large empires from time to time in India, but they have shaky control, not consistent, strong, unified control like in China. Empires would use armies or connections to the gods to claim and validate their rule. There wasn't an extensive bureaucracy like in China. In China, for example, the emperor would select local leaders to then carry out the demands of the emperor. However, in India, the local leaders were already in place, and it was up to the emperor to work with them. Usually, the emperor let them maintain their control and their own rules as long as they recognized the dominance of the empire. And if Chandragupta or Ashoka said a rule was to be a rule, those local leaders had to enforce that. It's also important to note that there's no single language in India, so that standardization and communication are difficult. They didn't do what the Chinese did and make Mandarin the universal language, etc. So to continue on with India's geography, this is a geographical map to give you a better idea. You can see the various features, the Himalayas in the northwest, the fertile regions along the Indus and Ganges rivers, because remember, our rivers bring silt and fertility to the soil. And then we have the Deccan Plateau in the middle, the almost uninhabitable, dry, arid area. So we have farmland in the north area with farmers. Up in the Himalayas, there's a herding economy, which means people travel with herds of sheep or goats and make money that way. And then along the coastal regions, you have trading and seafaring. So people could trade right along the coast. They would fish and sell their fish and transport that way. Physical map of India, you can see some of the features reinforced, the Himalayas, the fertile regions, and the dry regions. India's political culture. Unlike in China, India had no formal political theory, so Confucianism functioned in China. India didn't have that. Instead, India relied on religion. So the only institution carried from one empire to the next was religion, typically Hinduism. So when we talk about how belief systems influence a civilization's development, think about how Hinduism influenced the politics of India. Unlike in China, there was no importance placed on political service. Instead, the importance was placed on your dharma and doing your religious duties. So what kept people in line? The caste system. They believed in their role. They believed that if they got good karma, they would move up in the caste system. And so a system of laws wasn't quite as necessary. The religion did the job. To the right, you see a statue of the goddess Shiva. As far as economic in India goes, the caste system affects economics as well. So you can take a look at the different castes, but our priests are at the top, warriors and rulers below that. So you'll notice that our religious figures are actually the most powerful in society. Then we have our skilled workers, our merchants, so trade is valued. Then our unskilled workers, and then our untouchables, which is the lowest class. So this is a visual representation of how close you are to moksha, because this is Hinduism with the caste system. So Brahmins are the closest to moksha, and our untouchables are the furthest from achieving moksha. So it's like a visual path on your way to moksha. Technology is important in economics, and when we talk about new technologies or advancements, it's important to keep in mind that that's how that civilization is making money. That's the goods they have to trade. So India came up with new uses for chemicals, which, since their key good was textiles created by artisans, textiles are cloths. Their most well-known textile is cotton, and so those chemicals were used as dyes to dye the cottons really bright colors. Hopefully you've seen some Indian images, maybe Slumdog Millionaire, but really bright clothing is very common. So in India there was extensive internal and external trade. The external trade, think about what route passed through northern China, through to India and even to the Middle East. That's the Silk Road on which they traded. So major trends are there's a lot of regional trade. There's very little trade over open seas, wide open seas. And the reason for this is we don't have advanced ships that can deal with ocean storms, and we also don't have navigation. So if a sailor can't see the land, they're not going to know where to go. So all of our open seas trade needed to be right along the coast to stop to be able to get food and fresh water and for navigating. So if they weren't trading on the ocean, they were using land routes. Think about the most common land route. Hopefully you thought of the Silk